This is the Conrad Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
For 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I'm Toolman Tim. Today is February the 11th, 2024. This is episode 424 of Workshop Radio. How are all my delinquents out there this evening? Great to have you here. We're going to bring Scott on in just a moment. We'll get the announcements out of the way, and then we're going to dive right into the idea of GSD, even when times are tough. All right, so 2 quick announcements or sponsors of the evening. Got to remember them because they keep the lights on and keep the generators topped up. Amy Dingman of A Farmer's Kind of Life, episode 265. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if you try to fix it, you might break it. But remember, if you're looking to get a little bit motivated, if you like your motivation with a cup of sugar, then listen to Amy because she has a way of telling you the tough stuff, even if you don't want to hear it. So give her some support, guys. Stick her in your old ear holes and go from there. And number 2, another podcast. My good friends, Nate and Aaron from Two Chicks Homestead. This week, their episode was 85, and it was on a topic near and dear to my heart, stress and anxiety. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit tonight. But again, 2 good friends of mine who deal with homeschooling, homesteading, ham radio, and everything in between. So their links will be in the description this evening. Give them some support, guys. Give them a big hug from the fellow delinquents out there. And with that, give me one moment here, and we will bring on our guest, Scott. How are you, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
Yes. No, thanks for coming on. I figured we'd return the favor. I was on your show couple of weeks ago, had a grand time, and we hit it off so well that I'm like, you know what? You ought to come on here, man.
Thanks. That was a great episode. I really enjoyed it too.
It was fun. It doesn't take long to get me talking about entrepreneurship and side hustles, and I could go all night,
Yeah, me too. That's great.
So tell us a bit about who you are, Scott, where you came from. Maybe I always love picking people's brains, your first job in high school, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Well, so I'm Scott Miller. I'm in Northeast Kansas. We've been doing Thrive in the Future podcast for 2 years now. Today's episode came out. It's episode 118. So this started 2 years ago in the middle of COVID, 2021, October. My friend Perpin and I were sitting around going to workshops or whatever, and we were having conversations that other people that we weren't hearing in other places, like community, get stuff done, and skills over stuff, developing skills, as well as things like, are you a wage slave, and things. And so it was like so many of the Telegram groups, so many of the podcasts are just inundated with COVID stuff that that's not going to hold up long term, right? Somebody starts talking about it, and a month later, that's obsolete because they either didn't go far enough or they went too far, and whatever, right? So we started a podcast, and we didn't talk about COVID for the whole first year. We were busy talking about community, getting stuff done. We started a local group, and then what we really focused on was, we wanted to work on processing some chickens, and it was like, well, maybe we need to get an expert. No, we're not going to get an expert. We're not an expert, but we're still going to GSD. So we started getting together and sharing skills. How do you make vinegar? Hey, I don't know. Let's try it. Right. And, we got together and did farm tours. Yesterday, we got together and we did a property walk, and then did an evaluation of these folks' land, and then gave our opinions on what we think would go there. Hey, we think you should put some mulberry and some willow down there by your pond and stuff like that. So, those are the kind of community things we do locally, and that builds that. And like I said, on the podcast, we didn't even talk about COVID for a whole year. So even through the mandates, all that stuff, right? So because we were too busy talking about other stuff.
So 2020, when it all broke loose there, and you're sitting back and thinking, man, nobody's talking about the important things. How did you even know what the important things were? Where did you come from kind of previous that kind of brought you into this self-reliance prepping kind of mindset?
Sure. So, and it all, just like everybody else, goes back to Jack to some extent. So 10 years ago, I'm an IT guy. I'm working in downtown Kansas City. My friend is a prepper. We're sitting around, and that was the beginning of the Antifa type protests, things like that. And they actually shut down our work and said we needed to go home early because we couldn't get out of the parking lot. Right next door was this big park where most of the protests happen in Kansas City, right in downtown Kansas City. So we were sitting at lunch, and my friend said, hey, if we couldn't get out of here, how do you get home? If, SHTF happens, how do you get home? And then next thing I know, I had a bug out bag. Next thing I know, I discovered Jack's show, and my wife and I moved out, got 10 acres of land, and have food forests, have horses, donkeys, 18 chickens. We're growing our own food. So that's how we turned around.
How did that first conversation with the missus go when you wanted to broach the subject?
Well, it wasn't too bad because we were boarding our horse. And so to her, this was, hey, yeah, I'm gonna get some place to board my horse. And we came to look at this property, and she disappeared. The realtor's like, where'd your wife go? Well, she went back in the woods, and she's checking fences back in the woods. Can this handle my horse? Or is my horse going to wander back in the woods and, end up in somebody else's property? And he's like, isn't she going to look at the house? And I said, I don't think she cares about the house. She cares about the barn and the fencing. So she does the livestock. I do the gardens. And then I started growing my own trees. One of my friends planted some chestnuts down at the elementary school, thinking that, oh yeah, I'm going to show the kids how to roast chestnuts by the open fire. Principal nixed that, but the chestnut trees still went on, and now nobody picks the chestnuts up. So I go down there, pick the chestnuts up, put them by the bucket, put them into buckets of sand, started sprouting them out like a Kiva Silver over there at Twisted Tree Farm. And now I got a side hustle selling trees that are adapted to the Midwest.
So how'd the move go because that was you? So if I got my math right here, 2020. Mm-hmm. So how was the market when you decided to buy? Because things went crazy there for a bit.
Right. So we moved here in 2015, and it was pretty good. So, we were far enough out from Kansas City and the other metro places where we've got 10 acres, we've got a barn, and we've got a house from the 80s, and it was reasonable. Now it's gone up 60% since then, but so yeah, it was pretty good. One of the challenges from a 2020 standpoint, which we were talking about in the pre-show, is we're all prepped up. It shouldn't have been a big deal, right? And instead, I went to the store because A, they told me I couldn't, right. And B, I wanted to see it, right? And it was just shocking because all the milk's gone, all the soup's gone, all the vegetables are gone. Nobody touched any of the fresh vegetables, but and then watching that, and that's the whole thing. So we've got 2024 going on. It's going to be crazy. But how do we look at it from a positive standpoint? How do we keep positive and get stuff done this year instead of, and that's the way we focus on the podcast, is instead of talking about the Civil War, Texas, whatever. I mean, there's other folks that are talking about that kind of stuff. We're talking about, doing a property walk and getting a food force going. So,
all right, because there's always a ton of folks worried about whatever, it doesn't insert latest calamity here, because I mean, as long as humanity's existed, it's always been. Sure. So how do you, because when I was on your show, I said to you, send me your shtick. And what I mean by that, of course, is your elevator pitch. Like what's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning and you get excited about? And of course, you came back with, getting shit done even when times are tough. Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, I love that. So let's start there. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think a lot of it is the mindset, right? So many people were well prepped, but they were freaked out. And why? Because it kind of shook their world. It shook their mindset. And it's like, you've been planning for this kind of stuff. I mean, and we were so all this happened on Friday the 13th in 2022, on March 13th, right? Yep. They sent us home. We didn't know what was going to happen. And then we're at the gun show or the gun store that weekend. And this guy from one of the rural communities says, this is serious stuff. We've been given the notice that tonight they're going to lock us in for 2 weeks. I work for the water department. They're executing an emergency. They're locking us in just for security reasons. And I got to live and sleep on a cot for 2 weeks. And we're all going, holy crap, this is crazy. So I get on this local board that we had that were homesteaders and new homesteaders and a lot of people that moved from out of town, from in town and out here. Right. And they were all going, oh, you're creating fear and all this other stuff. And this other guy that was on there from the county said, no, he's right. We've been given the same notice. So, and then Monday lockdown, whatever. And, just, it's amazing how many people, including myself, who were not ready for that I'm prepped up. I'm fine. I could have sat home. I could have watched it happen. And, what's that meme where that girl's watching the house burn, right? And, but it still even freaked me out. So, we focused from a podcast standpoint, we're focusing on keeping positive and what kind of positive stuff can we do? So like the first 10 episodes back in October, right? The first one was on community. What's it take for community? Everybody's saying they're part of a community, but mostly it's an electronic community, right? One of the other episodes was Diary of a Wage Slave. When somebody, you go to church, you go to a social event, right? What's one of the first things that happens within 5 minutes, especially among guys? It's, hey, where do you work? Right?
Yep.
And it's like, I'm not defined by where I work, right? So we talked about that. We talked about the skills over stuff, and those episodes still hold up 2 years later. So it's those are the kind of things we want to focus on.
So let's talk about the wage slave end of things, because for my wife and I, it was kind of cool. We were in the middle of opening the daycare, so there was that was tough. But as far as the business I was running, I basically got to do whatever I wanted to do, because I was fairly self-reliant and independent. So talk a little bit about that, the Diary of a Wage Slave, and where that came from, and what you did in your life to kind of not be that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed was that if somebody asks you what you do, so like I'm an IT project manager, right? I would say I'm an IT project manager, and sometimes I'll say I work at XYZ company, right? I had somebody tell me that, hey, you're limiting yourself by that, instead of saying I currently am doing this and I currently work here. And then that makes it sound like, right now in times that are tough, you're going to find jobs in the corporate world by your connections. You're not going to find it through the stuff that's posted. And the best jobs that you're going to find are the ones that you're going to be recommended for. You're going to find some contact you had 5 years ago or something like that, right? So don't limit yourself by saying, oh yeah, I am this. See, you're classifying yourself, and I work there like you are owned by them, right? So that's how we approach that. And it's funny because now when somebody asks me, so what do you do? I say, well, I work in IT, but I'm really passionate about trees. And I immediately pivot to I'm growing trees, and And I really like, the story about the chestnuts and everything else. So it's kind of funny because they're like, wow, they got kind of like whiplash, but I pivoted it to the stuff that I want to talk about. Right. And another thing is like in your situation or in a homesteading workshop, we really don't talk about that stuff. Yesterday, most of the people that were at our workshop where we were doing the property walk, you don't know me that well, but we never once said, "Hey, what do you do?" And so that's more freeing, right? You're not being classified. You're not having the pecking order conversation within 5 minutes like you would at the church or a social gathering in town or something like that, right? So
that's really cool.
Part of it is that mindset to get away from the idea that, hey, I'm more flexible, and having multiple side hustles and flipping those up, right?
So had you started your exit plan, and I don't even know if what you'd consider an exit plan if you want to get out of the quote unquote, real world job or whatever, but is your trees and your different side hustles, is that a few steps along the way toward giving you a bit more of that freedom?
Sure. And one of the things that I'm really looking at, it started because doing annual gardening every year is really starting to wear on my old achy joints, right?
Sure.
So I started turning more of the corners of my garden into perennials and then planting annuals in with the perennials. So I've got hazelnut and I've got, I've got other stuff, walking onions and things. And then in the gaps, I just throw some black-seeded Simpson lettuce, the cut and come again lettuce. And then I'll cut that as we go along. Right. But a lot of it was that, like you were saying, when you were on my podcast is, hey, you don't have to replace all your whole income. People get wound around the axle about this idea that, I'm never going to be able to replace my income. And they get paralyzed. Right. But that's not the way to go. It's, hey, I made 10% this year. And, hey, that's 110%. If you could multiply it and then say, maybe I'm not going to make 100% replacement of my income making trees, but I can make 10% selling trees. I can make 10% by, this week on the podcast, I had an episode on how to build a side hustle by buying mini businesses on Flippa. And, if I can make 5% doing that, then little by little, I can bridge the gap. That's going to help me in case I get laid off, in case I get my pay cut or whatever else. Right.
So how important is it to lay that foundation? So you talked about, in case, right? Or how about in case you get sent home because everything gets locked down again? But how important is it to lay that foundation so that if the times get really tough or something bad happens to you, you can start ramping that up?
Yeah, and that's a lot of it. So if you sell trees, then that's going to be very seasonal. Like we talked about last time, I'm sitting here and we're all dreaming about gardens. We're ordering seed. We're buying comfrey. We're doing all this stuff. Normies don't do that. So normies buy it all in May. And if you look at Google Trends, comfrey and hazelnuts and all that stuff peak in May. So, I'm going to have a certain amount of people that are gung-ho in February, and then there's the rest of them are going to be in May. And then I had quite a bit in the fall this time. I was really surprised. So, a lot of it is it all goes back to that mindset, right? Where it's not either or, it's a this and, right?
Sure. Okay. So it's funny. I've been, I don't know, I think about 3 years, the podcast has been running now. And there's certain themes that just keep coming back around. And one of them is grit, or that's one of my pillars of preparedness. And it's one of those things that it's trial by fire. It's hard to learn unless you go through tough times, right?
Right.
And one of my biggest struggles, especially when I was younger, and still to an extent, is, when things are going good, I can get everything done. I can do all the things. But when there's outside stressors or something like an anxiety inducing event, like a lockdown, for instance, for a while, I tend to lose my motivation, being absolutely upfront. So where does a person head with that? How do you, because like you said, we have so many folks in our communities that are prepped up. They had their toilet paper forts before COVID, but they still lost their ever loving minds and thought, the sky was falling.
Sure.
Any kind of, baby steps or things that you can talk about there?
Yeah, I think so. Example is some folks at work say, wow, you didn't get really riled up about this at all. Like they said, oh yeah, we're going to have a go live weekend. We're going to be working 72 hours straight, something like that. Right. And things are going wrong. We're into Sunday and it's still going wrong. And folks said, hey, you kind of kept your cool in there. And I said, believe me, this is nothing. I've been through much worse than this. I've worked, 6 months, 7 days a week or something like that. Right. And it's important at this point, we've been through 4 years of crazy now, and it's been like this, but for the most part, I think that there is people want to forget the tough times. They want to forget the pain, right? I think part of it is sit back and take some inventory of yourself and what worked, what didn't work, right? Lessons learned. And so what can we improve on from a preparedness standpoint? What can we improve on from a mindset standpoint? We need more community. We need more connections, right? And things like that. So if you start taking an inventory, you can look at that and then learn a little bit, and that can help you prepare for the next time.
It's a couple of good C words there, connections and community. And it's right. At least the second time I've heard you say community. So here's a good one, because again, we talk about electronic communities, and for me, it was a lot of years of being on the TSP Zello group, talking to people. Sure. All I had was voices to talk to, and my wife would say, oh, you're talking to your imaginary internet friends again, right?
That's what my wife says too.
Yeah. So where do we go? How do you go from, hey, it's great to see B-Man J in the chat this evening, but how do you turn that into real life connections and beyond that resiliency? Because that's where, the lone wolf mentality, anyway, we don't even need to go there, but community brings resiliency. So how do you develop that in real life?
Well, so one thing is when you're at workshops, start making connections with folks, have meetups. And this is the whole thing. Don't get into that expert mindset where, well, we can't have a workshop because, we don't have Nicole Sauce or somebody you can come from, somewhere else to do it. Right. We're going to have a meetup at the coffee house and we're just going to talk. The funniest thing, the thing that we're all looking forward to that we're really, really excited about is a seed swap. So we'll get together at the coffee shop. We'll get together at, some restaurant, and we'll pull out our box of seeds, and it's all, some people have it in those pill boxes. Some of us just have them all over the place. Right. And you start pulling seeds out and you'll see grown men just get super excited. Oh, wow. I've never seen anything like that before. Can I have a few of those? And, you get a box of envelopes and you take a few out, and you take a little handful out and you say, hey, try this. Right. And it's funny seeing everybody get so excited about that stuff. And then if they save the seed, then you're starting to build a land race where it's adapted to your land. Right. Joseph Lofthouse has a really good book about that, about adapting everything to your land homestead drug deals. Right. Well, along those lines too. Comfrey. My wife is singing the praises of comfrey right now. So we made some comfrey salve, and we'll get together and we'll make some comfrey salve together as a workshop. And, not everybody shows up, but, we'll make some comfrey salve, and then she's putting on her face and she's all happy about it. Right. So she puts it on her face at night and she's all happy about that.
So go back. So, okay, you've got, your seed swap and you've got a community that's developed now.
Sure.
But we'll go back 9 years to 2015 to when you moved out into the country or to your first homestead. Because that, for me, it's funny, but my wife and I were talking about this the other day, is we're not super close with any of our neighbors. And our very next door neighbor, we lived here for 2 years before I had a conversation with her. And that was on me. That wasn't on anyone else,
Right.
So where did you start? And for other folks who are out there saying, that's good for you, but I can't do that. What were the first steps to kind of inch your way into a community?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is having conversations. You're down at the farmer's market, you're talking to someone, right? I think right now, we've got our circle of influence, we got our circle of concern, but you also have the inner circle, you have the outer circle, and then you have some others, right? And some folks are not going to work their way into your inner circle, right? Like the Freedom Cell, I think they called it the cadre or whatever, right? So
Sure.
don't get so, and this was hard for me to get used to, is don't exclude just everybody, right? So sure, the person down at the farmer's market that's selling me sauerkraut that's locally made, right? She may be a little bit borderline woke, right? So sure, I'm not going to invite her into my inner circle, but I don't have a problem with inviting her to the seed swap or something like that, right? And then you get into, you don't exclude everybody, and then you get, because I want to trade with people, and I'm not going to exclude everybody in that situation. So, and then concentrate on the circle of influence and the circle of concern. So, am I getting all worked up about stuff that's going on, the outrage of the day, right? And
Right.
Does it have anything to do with me? No. Does it have anything to do with my neighbors? Probably not. And, I'm just like you. I mean, I'm not fond of my neighbor. He's got a dog that keeps coming over here bothering my donkey, but, and stuff. But, and so we just one of the things, a couple of weeks ago, Justin Rhodes had his homestead, he's got, Abundant Homestead or something like that, his group.
Yeah.
And to get more people on the mailing list, he opened it up so that he has a homesteader directory, that you don't have to be a sign up person or a paid member of his community to use it. So all these people jumped on his mailing list, and now there's this homestead directory. And so we looked up the people who were local, and we sent them some emails and said, hey, we're having a meetup over at the coffee shop. Come on out and join us. This is what we're all about. That's how we met the people that we went and we had a property walk with yesterday. And then when we were talking to them, we hit it off with them. And then they said, hey, we've got this area of our property that we'd like your feedback on what we should do about it. So we all went over there and we just walked it and said, hey, yeah, I think that you should do this. Well, what about that? What about this? Right. So, those people were not our friends a month ago.
Right.
So we leveraged that and do I know where they work? No. We didn't have that conversation. Right. So
as a kid, and even my 20s, and my wife would say I'm probably still this way, but I was always the type of guy that had to be right, and so by that exclusion, it meant that everyone else was wrong, right? So, and when I realized, I'm not just a libertarian, but I'm also kind of a voluntarist, I realized that most of that other stuff doesn't matter. But it was still hard because I meet tons of people from all walks of life, from crunchy granola to damn near militant prepper, right? And if I excluded everyone out there that had one weird belief, because I'm sure I have lots, I'd have no community at all. But talk about that a little bit, because you said, you've met some people that are probably further on the left spectrum than maybe you would normally hang out with. But our normal inclination and modern society's inclination is, no, you're wrong. Get away from me. Right. So what can we do to not do that?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is finding the common ground, having the do the free thing and smash. Yeah. So that's finding the common ground and just having some non confrontational type, everybody's going to love a seed swap.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be talking about Trump or whatever at a seed swap, most likely, and so, so stuff like that. We'll have a garden walk, we'll have whatever. Right. And then, that's usually something that's safe or whatever. So, that really helps.
So you talked about Flippa, and you and I didn't really talk about this at all when I was on your show, but I want to pivot just a little bit. We may come back to some of the other stuff, but
okay.
You talked a bit about in your notes that you sent me, affiliate marketing without selling your soul. And I really like that because, there's a lot of content creators whom I've watched for a long time that have walked that really tight rope dance, and some of them have fallen off on the wrong side for sure.
Right.
So what let's start with that. Why are you passionate about affiliate marketing, and, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, so, everybody wants to get into affiliate marketing, but when you run the numbers, I pulled up the numbers the other day on Amazon Associates, right? That if you send somebody there, they're going to have a cookie that only lasts 24 hours. If they buy a book, a physical book, that's 4.5%. If they buy lawn or garden, that's 3%. If they look at that book and then they say, oh, there's a Kindle version, and they buy the Kindle version, I didn't see anything in the list where you get anything for that. So, and especially since they're moving towards Kindle Unlimited. Now, the key is to partner with other people. Like, so I've got Will Horvath, who from Permaculture Apprentice, who does training. I've taken his training. It's not, and this is the whole thing about not selling your soul. I mean, it's really funny that I had this friend of mine that was in Amway, and he was, so we're sitting there playing a video game or watching TV or something. And he says, you want something to drink? And I said, sure. So he goes over and he grabs me an Amway brand energy drink. So he gives it to me, and then his voice changes and he's in salesman mode. Hey, what do you think of this? How would you like me to order you some of this? Right. There's so many people that are doing their side hustle, or even it's difficult for me too. Right. When I first started the podcast, it was funny because I would change my voice when I would start. And It was getting in my own head, and I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" Or I mean, that's exaggerated, but you know what I mean. And it was starting to get inside my own head, so it was funny. But if you start grifting, then people are going to know, and they're going to say, "Yeah, you're starting to sound like a grifter, right?" And so the key is to make relationships with folks on stuff that's more likely to be so Permy stuff is 25-50%, right? That's going to be a lot better than Amazon, but everybody gets locked in on Amazon, and a lot of these other places, they have cookies that last longer than 24 hours. So one of the problems, and Nicole said this last week, that how many times are you going to get canceled by being an Amazon affiliate because you didn't hit the number of approved sales this 90 days or whatever? I just got the notice the other day, right? So I'm sending people to Amazon. I'm buying stuff on Amazon with a different account. Where's all these other things going? So either the cookie expires, something happens, or they bought the Kindle version, and then it's like, okay, I don't have the number of approved sales this 90 days, so they're going to cancel me. And they've already done that like 2 or 3 times. And then, I started back up and I was okay for a while. So, if you make the relationships with the folks, you're going to get a bigger return on investment. It's probably more aligned with your brand. And if you start selling your own ebooks or stuff, but, don't do it. Yeah. One of the things that I had in this episode this week on the Side Hustle with Flippa is most everything over there has some part that's AI. And one of the questions I had is, would you be able to, in good conscience, spin up a website with AI content just so you could make some bank on affiliate marketing? Right. Because a year ago, the most popular tweet on Twitter had like 8,000 likes, was a step-by-step on ChatGPT will allow you to set up a complete website with content in one weekend and you can make bank. Right. But I've read AI content and either talks around an issue or a topic, or it's all flowery and stuff, right? And it's effusive and it sounds weird and it's all like fakey like. And, people are doing that. But Google knows whether it's AI or not, and they favor whether it's in your voice, and they favor whether it's non-AI content. So you're better off writing your own content and just write. So, there's it's always the hard question. If I could spin up a website and it has mostly AI content, would I do it? So, I do it for a while until I could rewrite the stuff. That's part of the topic in this week's episode is, okay, I bought a website. It's got above average writing. It's got 66 articles. I'm slowly changing them to my content, but they're not goofy, like super duper obvious AI, but they're, if you take over another website like that, can you have the same tone? Right. So I'm writing, and they're used to having Toolman Tim writing an article. Right. So Toolman Tim sells me the website. I'm starting to write content now. Am I going to write the same kind of content? Probably not, because I have a different voice. Right. And then will that crash and burn? Right. So those are some of the things to look at.
Man, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, sorry. That was like one long and one sentence.
That's good. No, it's good because there's so much there. So because when you're a content creator, you always, at least for me, to scratch my itch, I have to be trying something new, right?
Sure.
But when I'm not trying something new, or when I am trying something new, sometimes that can turn folks off, like you said, a different voice or a different type of content or that sort of thing. It's always such a fine line there,
Right.
But I want to back up just a bit. I was listening to Mike Rowe's podcast the other day, and he's one of my favorites. And he had I can't remember the lady's name, but she was a very famous beach volleyball player from the 90s. And he asked her about, there was this, it was some sort of ad deal that she could have made that would have been very high six figures, like really high. Right. And she turned it down because it didn't jive with her. It wasn't even that it wasn't a legitimate product or a legitimate service, but it wasn't something she would personally use. And it was a really cool juxtaposition because she was there, and Mike Rowe pipes up and he's like, "You do realize what I used to do for a living?" And she said, "Well, not really." He said, "I used to sell for the Home Shopping Network. They would literally send me out and say, here's a doll, sell it to old people at 3:00 in the morning and talk about it for the next hour." He said, so where's the balance there for folks? Because, I listened to the old reruns of Art Bell. Some of the stuff that he was selling, and he hated the ad reads, but he knew it was a necessary evil, perhaps. I mean, some of the stuff I would never even think about. So how do you find that balance? Because, you can be, a broke artist, or you could be, a rich sellout. So where is it?
So mine, for the most part, there's enough stuff where I've used their stuff, right? Like the permaculture training I was talking about. I've actually taken the training, so I know, right? And I usually stick to stuff like that. If I put books on the website for Amazon, then they're books that I've used, read, whatever, right? And a lot of the times I'll put comments that this shook my world, like "Live Not by Lies" by Rod Dreyer during 2020. That rocked my world. So, that stuff like that is where the rubber meets the road, and you're not just, grifting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So find things that you would use, find things you have used.
Yep.
And then find that sweet spot where you partner directly with the company, and find the companies that give you a substantial piece of the pie. Sure. Because I personally used to recommend everybody start with Amazon because it was such a low barrier to entry. And now I realize, it may have been good advice at the time. It may not have been, but I've changed my opinion for sure, because I'm 100% in your camp. Partner with individual brands and folks that you respect and deal with, because that's more lucrative as well. Way better.
Right.
I have seen my Amazon traffic has stayed the same. And over the last 3 years, it's gone this way for revenue for no reason. It just, there's all these different things that they find. Anyway, so
sure.
Yeah, I love it.
And YouTube's Absolutely. The same way. And, Jack's talked about that Amazon used to be bank, and then every year or so they renegotiate your contract. Right. So, and then another thing is, as you start making relationships, you'll make relationships with the small guys.
Yes.
And they don't have the infrastructure where, where somebody's putting a code in and then they know that they came from you. Like I've got Carrie from Strong Roots Resources as one of my sponsors. We haven't worked out some deal. It's just, that I send people over to him. He sends people over to me. So, and that's maybe what you have. So one of the things that, from a podcast standpoint, so Perpin, the guy I start with, he's not on here anymore. He decided he wanted more intentional community. He ended up becoming Orthodox Christian, and now he's a monk. So wow. I had to reboot the podcast, and initially I started talking to people that I knew. So I'm like talking to people that are not, they're not pros, right? They haven't been on a podcast. Sure. I can't even ask them the Jack intro question, because all of a sudden they freak out and they know they're on a podcast, right? So we just turn it on and we start talking, and I have to edit it later on, right? So, those kind of people may be selling something that my listeners may want, right? Like comfrey salve, soap, whatever, right? Like Homestead Padre has hot sauce and stuff. So, send them over to them, work out something. They might not have the infrastructure behind the scenes where you're getting, I got 5 sales from Scott this week or something, but, sometimes it's a handshake, sometimes it's not. And, and it may not even be monetary, but, you're making goodwill. You're a month from now, someone comes back to me from that heard from me, that got sent to me by somebody like Carrie or something. Right. And, stuff like that.
That with me, the little Batrix, I don't know if you've ever seen me talk about them, but the Batrix power cards, I found them through somebody I followed on Instagram, and my video went crazy on TikTok, and the owner, Sam, his son, found the video, and they had no infrastructure whatsoever for affiliate marketing. And so they wanted to partner with me. And so they basically built a code at that time. It's all they had. And so they, the first couple of months, he just sent me a personal check in the mail. Here's your affiliate money. And then of course they found, they had some bigger sponsors and different things. So now they have a whole system, but it's fun. And you get to see the behind the curtain, like the wizard behind the curtain. You get to make real relationships, and you get to back products and services that you actually use and believe in, and it feels pretty good. You can go to bed at night and not worry about it. Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing. I have a triangle where I send I also refer to myself. So my biggest revenue is not from the podcast, it's from selling trees.
Right.
So, the podcast sends to the trees, the podcast sends to the newsletter sends to the trees, and it goes around and around and around. Right. So, that's part of that. That sounds very like I planned it or something, and I've got a chart or something like that, but it's not quite like that. So
it happens over time. I want to get you to talk more for those who don't know how podcasts work, and we were hanging out in the green room just before the show started, and you mentioned this thing, Flippa. I'd never heard of it before. So of course, automatically, as soon as you tell me about some sort of entrepreneurial venture or, another way to make money, my eyes open up, my ears open up. So tell me a little bit about what you covered in the podcast, because this was something I'd never heard of. And I think some of the folks might kind of dig it.
Sure. So Flippa.com is basically like a eBay where you can buy websites. And the idea is they're mini businesses or websites, right? And there's two kinds on there. There's starter sites, which means they don't have any traffic. It may just be a template. It may have content. It may not. And then there's established sites, and the established sites may have traffic. They may have revenue, whatever. And I go through all of the lessons learned and the mistakes I've made over the last 2 months looking at it. And you can get a starter site for, I bought one for $49. I bought another one for $200, right? The key is go into it with because it's just like eBay. So you got to be careful that you don't get sucked into bidding like crazy. You've got the big thing is, and I talked about this, is stepping back and having the right mindset. What's your goals? What's your goals with what you're doing over there, right? Do you want to own the business? Do you want to flip the website? Do you want to build up the revenue or fix the SEO or whatever the challenge you think it is, right? So I'm looking at something and I'm saying, oh, I can do a better job than this. And then, for example, I bought a website that had ebooks. The ebooks were obviously created with AI. I decided, okay, I like the template of the ebooks and I want to strip out the AI and I'm going to put my own ebooks on here and sell them, stuff like that. Right. And so they've got that. They've got some that have a lot of them that have Amazon affiliate links and things. And that's the main revenue. One of the challenges is, so you've got starter sites. My goals are that I want to look for a site that I could build on something that I could point to my own content. I want a site that I can manage because I use WordPress mainly. So I want something that I can manage in WordPress. And then I want something that's easy for me to maintain and understand. So those are my main goals. And then I've got the biggest thing that I have to watch out for is believing my own BS. So sure. I can save it, and stuff. So, so that's the main thing. So I saw, even though it's not in my brand, I saw a guitar pedal site. I love the setup. I love the way it was. It was generally written in, he hired a freelancer to do it. So it's not AI, but the people were not guitarists. So I'm like looking at it and so I sat down and I said, I would pay this much for it. And I wrote down 10 articles I would write and put on there. And then I looked into what affiliate marketing I could do. You could send them to Amazon to buy pedals. There's Guitar Center has affiliate marketing. Sweetwater Music supposedly has affiliate marketing. So I did enough of research there to say, what's my business model? What would I do? Right. And then I came down to the point where I lost the bid, but I said, I could spin something like this up and I could come up with 20 articles in no time flat, and then use it like that. So without having to depend on AI. And even though it's not in my permaculture podcast, trees brand, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just grifting or something. And I was constantly reading this thing saying, I can do better than that. I could do better than that. I could do better than this. Right. And that's the key. You could also use Flippa to go and find a niche, however you pronounce that word, right?
Yeah.
And, so you can use Flippa to go and get ideas for businesses. And then maybe you could write a template for it, write up some quick 10 articles, SEO it, and sell it as a startup site. So,
so are there websites on there that are already not just generating traffic, but also generating income?
Mm-hmm.
So
one of the challenges with those are that you are usually, why are they selling it? Right. And they're usually at the descent, either because they got tired of using it, they got bored, or they got tired of maintaining it. Right. And you'll usually see it'll be like this for a graph of their revenue.
Okay.
And it'll be like this. You can tell when they gave up. Right. Because articles either stopped being published or something. Right. And then, so you have to take that into account when you're doing your research, because you're looking at it going, hey, wait a minute, they're saying this has $92 a month revenue, but I'm looking at the graph and it's like $3 a month. It was $92 a month when 9 months ago, but it's not. They haven't been keeping it up, and it's been going down or something. Those are the due diligence you have to do, and try not to get, believe your own BS. Right? I can save it, right? So, but there's some decent ones in there that are, $200 to $1,000, and if you have a business plan or something, and you can keep from chasing after the promise, then there's some good opportunities. So I'm going to spend some more time looking at stuff like that, either taking it and creating some starter sites myself, or getting something like that guitar pedal site, and either creating a similar one. And this is where you go to, say you want to create a similar one, right? So you go to Google Trends, you could see, how popular really is this? How many clicks are there? How many people are searching this per month, right?
Sure.
You look for Comfrey. It gets pretty big in May, right? So and you look at all those things. You ask them if you could see a dump of their Google Analytics. You can do third-party SEO on them and see how much organic traffic they're getting from search engines. You could see how much backlinks they have, meaning how many references are they getting from other websites. All that stuff is pretty much free. You can do without having to deal with them. And then you could get your research. Look at this. I'm like, I could write an ebook about this already. I've been doing it for a couple of months. So, but those are some of the things that I cover in the episode this week.
Once you get to a point where you feel like you've got it, I don't know, it's either working or hasn't worked for you. When you've made a decision one way or the other, we should have you back on and do a whole episode on it, because I think I'm always looking for new things. And, again, you're talking about how a year ago, everybody was all on the AI bandwagon, build websites from AI. And of course, everything's a pendulum, but all you really have to do is just stay ahead, kind of chase the trends. And I know I make that sound like it's so easy, but you really do. You have to be on the next thing just a little bit before someone else is, right? So I love hearing about this stuff, because, and I've said it many times before, that there's been lots of things that I haven't had any interest in, and my community's pulled me along kicking and screaming, because they're like, Tim, you got to do this, And so you have these people like, yeah, this is the new thing, try it. And so, I'd love to have you back and do that, because, I want to learn for sure.
Yeah. So one of the ones that I lost this week was prepperinsider.com.
Oh, wow.
So the guy's got a website, a blog that's Prepper Insider. He's got a good amount of traffic, but he never developed any revenue on it because he was using it to get free stuff from, so he would review stuff that was coming from prepper places, right? And he had a whole list. He's got a great list. I mean, the site's still up. You can go look at it, right? And he's got all of these vendors. They would send him free stuff. He would review them. And then he said, I don't feel good about, advertising for these people, and I'm getting free stuff. So, I don't think I need to do that. So, so then he kept that going until he got bored with it or whatever. Right.
What did it sell for? Do you know?
Yeah. So this is another tip, is that just like with eBay, don't jump in too quick because it'll drive it way up. And they've got reserves, and a lot of stuff doesn't meet the reserve. So I think he sold it for $750.
Wow.
And
if you see another one like that, if you're not interested, let me know. I would have bought that. I mean, that would have been right up my wheelhouse. It would have fit right into what we're doing. That's awesome. Yeah. That's
and
cool.
The guitar pedal site, I think it had a reserve of 1,000.
Okay.
So, I mean, can I turn that around in a reasonable amount of time? I mean, you're still going to have to, it's going to take about a year to build up enough traffic, to build up enough, enough synergy there so that you can get a return on your investment, especially if you're starting from scratch. So if you start with a starter site, it's a minimum of a year. You're going to have to write, and make some connections and things. But, I mean, I could turn around $500. Not $500 is not a small number. Don't get me wrong, but
I get it.
It's reasonable to start the business. And what's even more reasonable is I've got enough templates and ideas and stuff where I could spin something up as a template in a starter site and say, hey, I got 20 articles here. They're handwritten. They're not AI. Run with it. And sell that for maybe $200. One of the sites that I bought is a allgardenadvice.com, and it's all garden advice. It's got a lot of stuff. It's got some pretty good articles. It's 66 articles. I'm going to replace a bunch of them, but then it drives towards Amazon affiliate stuff, right? Problem is that it said in the small print is where you're going to get the problems. And this is what I cover in the small print. It says, hey, this is not a unique site. And I figured that out because the guy spun it up with another domain name and another logo the next week. So I'm like, okay.
Oh, okay.
So that's a problem with the starter sites is, they're reselling it. That's okay if you pay attention to the small print. And there's a lot of PLR and AI on some of these sites that, they're just spinning it up. And, I did a question on our Telegram group for Thrive in the Future. And I said, would you have a problem or qualms about doing this? Spin up an AI site just to make some money, just to make some bank. And some people said, yeah, no problem. So I don't know. I still have a little bit of qualms about that. So, I spun up this allgardenadvice.com. It's still out there, right? It still has their content. I rewrote a bunch of the content and I made all the affiliates so that point to my Amazon, and I'll slowly change it so that it has my content and it points to my stuff. Right. And I have to change some of the writing because it's foo-foo and, it's that overly effusive stuff. I just don't. And I give some examples in the episode about, okay, this is what it said before, and this is how I changed it.
It's funny you mentioned that because I started using ChatGPT really early on. And I got a question from the audience here I'm going to ask you in a minute. But
okay.
I found when it first came out, I don't know how to explain this per se, but its answers were to the point and direct and not, and I don't even mean politically correct, but everything that comes back with ChatGPT now has I don't like attachments to it or conditions. It's like, well, this could be, but, and there's no direct or specific thing that comes back. It's almost like listening to a politician give a speech. When you ask a politician a question and they'll answer every question except the one you ask them. Right. ChatGPT's gotten a lot like that. So we'll see. It's a really good research tool. That's the one thing that I've enjoyed is using it to find sources. But boy, yeah. Anyway, that was my hobby.
I've used it like I'll say, hey, write me an article about comfrey, and it'll write an article, and I don't like any of the article, but it had one bullet point that I didn't think about.
Yep.
So then I'll use that bullet point and I'll use it. But for the most part, it's like those clickbait articles in mainstream media and weather.com site, right? So you click on those, they don't really talk about the issue. They just kind of like talk around something. That's what ChatGPT sounds like to me, or it's overly effusive, weird, just flowery language.
It's like when you get a response from someone overseas who's trying to speak English. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but their idea of what polite is and what our idea of polite is are two different things. Mm-hmm. And something gets lost in translation. And that's kind of where it ends up. It's so odd. It's kind of off-putting just a little bit too,
Yeah. Now, some people say that they've mastered the prompts, so it's not so bad. They've got to figure it out how they can make it. One of the keys is that when you need to write, tell your story, make it personal. That's something that ChatGPT does not, even if you tell it to do that, it can't write a personal story. It'll fake it, but it doesn't sound legit. It doesn't sound sincere.
Google just dropped theirs too. Came out just a couple of days ago. I can't remember the name of it, but I tried it this morning and it wasn't bad. We'll see. I just playing with it to see. But Hunter wants to know, when do you think human written? So I think what he's saying is human written content will end up pulling a higher price or getting a premium over artificially intelligent stuff.
Yeah, I think we're at that point right now. So there was a backlash. So it's funny. This next week, I have John McCoy, who's a freelance writer, on. He's been on my podcast before, and we're talking about this. We're talking about SEO, and you're starting to see the backlash, right? So Google will favor things that are written that are obviously from a personal standpoint. So it's starting to favor human written content. And if you are selling something like on Flippa, say you wrote the content and you're selling a startup site or even an existing site, that is a bonus. You could say, look, this is human written site. This is human written content. And the content is, it's 1,000 or more words. That seems to be one of the cutoffs as well. ChatGPT and those, they don't generally go that long. And so, so you're starting to see freelancers and people who hire freelancers, and you're starting to see the delineation between, okay, this is AI and this is not, right? And then I think that will go until AI gets a little bit better. But the thing that will always set you apart is what's your story. And then, ChatGPT or whatever is not going to be able to do a good job about that. They're going to be the written equivalent of 6 fingers on the hand, like they do right now, right? On the AI graphics. It's going to be that kind of thing where it's either going to sound stupid or effusive or fake, right? And so, stick to your story and tell your story. And this is hard for me because I sound like I tell stories real well, but when I write, I tend to write more because I do it all day long, every day at work. I tend to write more third person, detached somewhat and things like that. And then I have to step back and say, okay, I need to put my own story in this, right? I need to have this from my own point of view. And that is the thing that sets it apart.
I have this opinion or idea going forward that I think AI content is going to be like going and buying a t-shirt from Walmart, and human generated content is going to be like going down to your local farmer's market and getting a hand spun, alpaca wool sweater from a lady who crafted it themselves. There's going to be an audience for both. But of course, the Walmart bland AI driven stuff will be your, your $4 Walmart shirt. Whereas your alpaca hand stitched or whatever, you'll pay a premium for it because you have a story, you have a relationship, and you have something that was made from, a legit desire. And I'm going to guess there's always going to be a need for both. I hope.
I think so too. And I think that people will start seeing that, and then they'll say, hey, I'm not going to pay for your freelance thing because it sounds too AI. Right. And so we'll start checking ourselves as well. Right. And I think that'll be good because that'll bring up the quality of everything, because people will start to discriminate.
It absolutely will, because you can. So I've been using a program called Opus.Pro for 4 or 5 months now, and I've gone back and forth on it. I used it. And so for those who don't know, what it does is it takes, so tonight when we're done with this podcast, I will throw the entire episode into Opus, and within 10 minutes, it'll give me 25 or 30 60-second clips in vertical that I can put out to the different places.
Really?
Now, number one, I wouldn't be doing that by hand because I don't have the time anymore. But what I discovered was if I use that as a stepping stone, it does 80% of the work for me. And then I go in and make it my own. I center things. I change the like the editing a little bit, just to make it look like it was legitimately edited by a person. So it takes all the busy work out of it. And that's what I'm hoping AI does for us, for sure.
Right. You called that what? Opus?
Opus. It's OPUS.PRO.
PRO. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And I have an affiliate link in my description. So if you, I've been using them for, I actually had a half-hour Zoom call with some people from the company, and they're awesome. They do a great job. And it takes, you can tell when you see them, you're like, oh yeah, that's been generated. But if you go in and like, I just reframe the face and, just a few things. And I've had really good success with it.
Yeah. And that's something I need to look into. So almost all the time I record and then I edit it and it comes out later. Sure. 2 reasons. One is because it takes out all the ums. It takes out the spaces where I can suddenly have a brain fart and things like that. And then I'm, sometimes I'm talking to my friend who has a homestead, right? They're not professional. They've never been on a podcast in their life. And, they're going to freeze up at some point in there, so that helps me edit it correctly.
And Opus will take out the filler words constantly.
Really?
So yeah, that part it'll do. And it's also coming out with auto captioning. So you can just put a video in now without editing it and it'll just put captions. Oh, it's wonderful. But here's one. And maybe you might have an answer for this. Ellen wants to know, and Ellen's from down under. She's from Australia. I met her at prepper camp a couple of years ago. And she said, do you have a recommendation for editing software for someone who is learning how to edit? What do you use to edit your podcast?
So right now I use Audacity to record my podcast. Okay. And then video editing. I don't have a good solution for video editing. I was using Clipchamp by Microsoft, but it started crashing here recently, so I don't use it. I don't like it. And usually I need to get something like Opus where I can auto edit my audio, because otherwise I got to step through an hour and edit out all the things where I stop and stutter or restart the sentence or whatever else. Right. So, because it drives me absolutely crazy trying to listen to podcasts that are not edited and it's or if it's millennials, it's like.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I'm like,
I agree. I do, but you know what? Mine goes out 100% unedited after the show. So this show will be, I've got the process to where that's what I want. I want it to be like a live radio show. And I think I'm pretty good at not using filler words because I've done it for a long time, but there's always going to be a few in there. So, and I'm okay with pausing and whatever. So I'll throw it out for Ellen. I use Wondershare Filmora 13 now. But for the first 3 years of my content, I just used free products on my phone. I did all my editing on there until I just couldn't do it anymore. But Filmora 13
too long to do it on your phone now, right?
Oh yeah, and too much. I was getting too much carpal tunnel. And it's so much faster on a PC. But you do what you do,
Right.
So I've got one more question for you as we kind of wind down, and it was something I had never really thought of before you sent me this. Your shtick where we started and talking about getting shit done even when times are tough. Now, there's a line from Lampoon's Christmas Vacation where the granddaughter looks at the grandfather and says, "Dad worked really hard on that." And the grandfather says, "Well, so do washing machines." So here's my question for you. How do you, because in all of our kind of disparate communities that have come together, getting shit done is almost like a mantra, and that's great, but you can be really busy doing the wrong thing. So for you personally, how do you make sure you're not just being a washing machine? And I said it that way on purpose because, that's how he says it. But what are your specific kind of goals and points that help you to make sure you're not just beating your head against a wall?
Well, it's like, so most of the time we're going to get together if we're going to have a meetup or something. It's going to be on the weekends, right? So I've got to, do I want to do this or do I want to do that? And do I want to put a tree in here or do I want to do something else, right? I've tore out trees and replanted trees so many times. It's ridiculous, right? So those are the kind of ways that I look at things overall. You've probably had something like that, maybe not so much because you're live, but I have a interview with somebody and it just sucked. Sure. Right. Luckily I didn't go live. And then I contacted them back and I said, "Hey, that just didn't click. Can we get back together? I have these follow-up questions and then I'm going to, and I want to give it another try." Nice. And so we got that, and then I edited them together and stuff like that. So, that's some of the ones. I haven't really had too many times where I've had to kill things, but it was funny when Perpin, my podcast partner, started going towards his "I'm going to quit the podcast" thing. I'm going to move and I'm going to become a monk. That we had one podcast where we went and we toured a homestead from the 1800s. It's up here north of Kansas City, and it used to be a textile mill and everything. And he got a rude awakening that, hey, this wasn't a homestead. This was like a plantation. And all of a sudden he became right now it's kind of like people are moving away from the homesteading term, right? It's lifesteading or it's something like that, right? And sure. And he had that moment, and he was like, and we got to the end of the episode, and I said, "Oh, I can't even publish this." So, and then he moved, and eventually went and became a monk. But later on, I edited down to the point where it was not even identifiable as what the original episode was, but I took like snippets out that made sense and stayed with my brand. And nice. Then later on I came back and I said, "Look, this is how community changes, right?" The community we had during COVID. Once COVID was over, people started drifting away. Some people went and got the medical intervention and then they drifted away. Some of the you can make up your mind how you feel about that. But, community is going to wax and wane. New people are going to come in, people are going to leave. We had some really great things where we were pressing cider on an antique press, and I wanted to do it again. And it was like, no, I don't want to do it. So, okay. Can we borrow your cider press? No. Okay, then. And stuff, and then new people come in, and you can't let it get to you, because that is the normal, the normal flow, right? Mm-hmm. And people get really upset about stuff like that sometimes, but that's part of realizing the change and adapting.
That's good. Thank you, Scott. So
sure.
Tell us, where can we find you? Where can people throw money at you? How can they follow up with you?
Sure. So Thrive in the Future podcast. It's thriveinthefuture.com. It's on your favorite podcast app. All of my tweets say, listen in on your fave podcast app or thriveinthefuture.com. You can find me on Twitter at thrivingthefute, on Instagram at thriveinthefuture. I don't really spend too much time on Facebook, because that's pretty much just my boomer friends. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but and stuff. And if you want to, we've got other links on the website. If you want to join the Patreon, if you want to join the mailing list and join our Telegram group, it's signup.thrivingthefuture.com. And, that'll get you on the mailing list in our Telegram group. So one of the things we focus on in the Telegram group is, let's talk about positive solutions. What worked for you, what didn't work for you, right? What were your wins and what were your losses? We kind of keep away from the meme wars, and we talk about, hey, Grant Payne, who's been on my podcast lots and lots of times. He's like one of my friends and favorite guests, right? He's 23 and he's super, he builds mountains of IBC totes. Everything's IBC tote. He's got goat pen made of IBC totes, stuff like that, right? So he posts all his things that he did all weekend. And, so we've got stuff like that going on. It's really cool.
Nice. Well, I'll get your Telegram link from you, and I'll post it in my Telegram group. So maybe we can get a few more like-minded folk to come by for you, because I love Telegram. It's the place to be for sure. So
I agree.
Well, thank you, Scott. If you want to hang in the back for just a second, I'll close up the show and I'll be right back with you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tim.
No, thank you.
Sure.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. I love when folks ask me to come on their podcast. Love it. I know people are like, I'm not going to ask Tim. Maybe he's busy. Well, yeah, if I'm busy, I'll tell you. I'll be like, hey, in 3 weeks we can get on. Well, Scott and I hit it off. We had a lot of fun. I ended up having to do the interview out of a hotel room because we were on the road traveling for work, and shit happens. But I love Scott's attitude. I loved his mindset of keep it positive, but do all the things. And so give him some support, guys. He's got a great YouTube channel. His podcast is awesome. He's interviewed folks that anyway, give it a go. And I cannot wait to listen to this week's episode, because I hadn't even heard of that before. So give him some support, guys. Give him a great big hug from the Workshop Delinquents. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.